The journey of a lifetime is slowly coming to an end, with Chapter 20, The Son Without a Father. This was the 9th day Plucky had been separated from the rest of the group. For the last 2 days, he had been intrepidly going cross-country, guided by the carrion crow, Robber, an old friend of his father's. With Robber's help, Plucky traveled every night closer and closer towards the town where the crow had seen his friends. Right now, it was morning. The sun was low in the sky, and bathed the land with its usual orange glow. The sky was a pure cerulean blue, painted over which were many puffy pink clouds, illuminated by the sun. The spring was almost upon the region fully. It was cool but warm in the direct sunlight. Almost all the snow had melted now, and the exposed greenery was draped in morning dew. The rusted red color of the lone red fox's pelt stood out amongst the greenery. Plucky continued onwards despite the fact the sun was up, ignoring Robber's earlier advice to him, but he did so with good reason. He could see the town not far ahead. However, with the town came the humans, and he could see them too. The coal-black feathered crow looked anxiously to the ground for the red fox, and was surprised to see him still active and visible during the early hours of the day. Robber flew down and hovered alongside the running fox as he crossed an as of yet unplowed field.
Caw!
Robber squawked to get the fox's attention.
What are you doing? You know it's morning. You should be resting and hiding.
Plucky replied back, pausing as he breathed heavy from his running. Well, I figured. The more time I spend traveling, the quicker I'll get there, even if it's through daylight.
As reckless as your father you are,
Robber scolded. Again. So you keep saying. Plucky huffed back with slight petulance. Ever since he met Robber, he had heard more than enough about how similar he was to his departed father. It wasn't always bad things. While in their periods of rest during their journey together, Plucky and Robber had shared stories of each other's adventures and the comparisons between them. Plucky could tell Robber was delighted to be reminiscing about a dearly departed friend, but for Plucky, some of it was hard to hear. Of course, he had been told stories of the father he never knew by his mother and others. But Robber had been there from start to finish. As Plucky had been listening, it had been digging up old emotional wounds, some he never even knew he had. Personally, he revered his father as a hero. But who was his father? The fox cub bold who had given his life for him? The one who he had watched his mother mourn for all his life? Robber suddenly called again in effort to get the fox to stop for the day. Plucky could sense the anxiety in this one, and soon he came to a stop at the edge of the field. He squeezed through the bottom of a long hedgerow, and soon looked through a wood plank fence out to a playing field of a local school, adjacent to several other stone buildings. Plucky witnessed the human activity by the school. Robber perched atop the fence, and two watched. It was the start of a school day, and the fox and crow watched as the humans dropped off their own young into the large building, the far side of the field. I guess I should stop for now. There are too many humans about, even if they are clearly young. Plucky panted lightly, catching his breath.
It's because we're almost there,
Robber stated, then decided to comment on the fox's recklessness.
At least now you finally see some sense.
Yes, but you've got to admit, I've come far in such a short time, Plucky beamed smugly.
I will admit it. You should thank your lucky stars,
Robber conceded heartily.
But you should rest now. You'll be reunited with your friends and mate tonight,
Robber smiled.
I'll go and fetch some food for you now.
Thank you. Plucky smiled back as Robber flew off. He returned to underneath the hedgerow, so he was completely concealed from sight, and curled up head to tail, and waited for Robber to return. Plucky was asleep by the time Robber returned the first time. He would need it for later, but he was too excited to see his friends and mate again, so naturally his sleep was agitated. By the time Plucky had been stirred from his slumber, the sun was still up, but not visible. The omnipotent glowing orange orb was hidden behind a screen of thick grey clouds, clouds of which were now dominated the sky far in the distance. Plucky could feel it in the air. A storm was coming. A big one. When he awoke fully, he found several tidbits of food in front of him that Robber had stolen. Quickly he gobbled them up, and then looked around for the crow. He was perched on the fence post in a light sleep. Plucky barked quietly to wake him, which it did instantly. "Thought you were supposed to be active in the day?" Plucky asked jokingly.
Well, Robber yawned. I thought I would stay awake tonight to make sure you found your mate in the town. Plus, an afternoon nap never hurt anyone.
"That's debatable," Plucky chuckled. "Do you think it's safe to go now?"
No, Robert stated. Wait till it's fully dark. That shouldn't be too long, though. Not with that storm on the horizon.
So they waited. As the crow had said, it wasn't long before it was dark, and the town's orange street lamps turned on. The massive thick grey clouds were closer now, and bigger, and louder. The thunder could be heard in the distance. The faint rumble was enough to shudder any brave soul to the core, but despite this, the fox and the crow entered the town, hidden in the darkness. They split up to cover more ground. Robber flew around the outskirts, though he felt his usefulness may be tarnished as he couldn't see well through the darkness, even if most of the roads and paths were illuminated. Plucky continued to the town's center. It was completely deserted of any life, but he wandered around, looking for any sign, any smell, and any sight of his beloved mate. This was the 10th night he had been separated from Scarlet and his friends. He had been searching for several hours. He had passed shops and houses, and even a high walled-off churchyard. The storm was coming closer. It was even bigger and louder than before. Occasionally, a sudden flash of white would illuminate the town, followed by the disconcerting rumble. Plucky thought, maybe they hadn't gone into the town because of the storm? He was about to give up hope, until he looked ahead. An overturned bin? He ran up to it and examined it. Yes, clearly another fox had been here. He put his nose to the ground and sniffed around the area in hopes of picking up a scent. He needn't have bothered, for he then heard a muffled crash of another bin toppling over from around a corner down a small alleyway next to a shop. Clearly this fox was not intending to act discreetly. Plucky closed on the alley entrance slowly and silently, and then poked his head round the corner. And there she was. Plucky could recognize that beautiful shining scarlet fur and lithe female vulpine figure anywhere. It was definitely her, Scarlet, his mate, his one true love. He didn't move, though. Like he had when he had first seen her, he just stared in awe of her beauty. Though this time, instead of an open drop jaw of amazement, he wore a wide smile of pure affection. He almost let loose a tear. Scarlet was completely unaware of her admirer. She was too busy rummaging through the bin she had toppled over. There was nothing of worth in there for her. She huffed in frustration, and left it to turn to face the other bin. This one she could reach in as she climbed up atop an adjacent stack of plastic crates. As the lid flopped open, she stuck her head in, sniffing for anything edible. Plucky continued to watch, but instead started to stroll quietly towards her, and upon seeing her reach into the bin, so far half her body was in it, he couldn't help but repeat some helpful advice Scarlet herself had given him a long time ago. "You'll fall in if you climb any further," he said to her warmly. Startled by the fact she knew now she wasn't alone, Scarlet lifted herself out of leaning into the bin so fast she fell backwards off the plastic crates. She quickly got back up and faced her company. When she realized who it was, her heart filled with joy. A smile of pure happiness crossed her muzzle. Her eyes widened with surprise. Her ears perked higher than they had in a long time. Her tail swished eagerly side to side. She had to check first. "Plucky!" "Hey, it's been a while," Plucky replied with the same smile of pure happiness. "Is this you?" Scarlet almost screamed with joy as she leapt at him. She leapt at him so hard that Plucky was pushed right over onto his back as Scarlet jumped on top of him, nuzzling him hard yet full of love as she buried her head into his neck. Scarlet placed his front paws over her shoulders as a form of a hug and nuzzled her back, and on occasion, licking the top of her head. "I missed you so much," Scarlet almost sobbed. "I've missed you too," Plucky replied tenderly. They stopped nuzzling for a moment and looked at each other intently, their noses touching and eyes locked on the other, staring into each other's very soul. "I love you," Plucky muttered gently. "I love you too," Scarlet whispered soothingly. After what felt like an eternity of being lost in their love, Plucky and Scarlet were brought back to reality when a rumble of thunder bellowed across the sky. After this, Scarlet lifted herself off Plucky and sat before him as he did the same. "Plucky, what happened out there?" Scarlet asked anxiously. "I could ask you the same, really, but it's a long story," Plucky stated. "I'm sure," Scarlet conceded, but she was too happy to pry any further. "Oh, I'm just so glad you're safe," she said, as she nuzzled him again. "I'm glad you are too," Plucky nuzzled her back lovingly. As he was doing so, he realized she was shaking slightly. Are you okay? You're trembling." "I'm fine. Don't worry," Scarlet lied. She, of course, was carrying cubs. She had to tell him, but now wasn't the time for it, especially since she, too, could tell Plucky was bothered by something. "But you seem a bit troubled. Are you okay?" "I'm okay. My mind has just been all over the place recently." Plucky gave a white lie, as his mind had been all over the place. But it was mainly because of his recent conversations with Robber concerning his late father. However, he wasn't prepared to discuss these feelings yet. Now that he's found his mate, he had to make sure he found his friends, too. "Where are the others?" he asked. "Oh, they're around—" Scarlet began to answer, but was interrupted. "Gah! Robber!" Plucky shouted up to him. "Down here!" The crow's coal-black feathers gave him perfect camouflage in the darkened sky. The two foxes watched the bird touch down on the concrete pavement in front of them. Robber quickly looked between them before speaking to Plucky. "Oh, is this her then?" "Yes, this is Scarlet, my mate," Plucky announced with a smile. "Scarlet, this is Robber. He's an old friend of the family. He helped me to find you." "You helped?" Scarlet asked the crow. "Yes, you should both thank your—" Robber began, but was shockingly cut off when Scarlet pounced on him, carefully so as not to hurt him, and licked his tiny black head, much to Robber's struggling disapproval of it. "Oh, thank you so much for helping!" She praised the bird and then let him go. "Is there anything I can do to repay you?" "You cannot pounce on me again or lick me," Robber said sardonically as he picked himself up off the floor and ruffled his feathers. Plucky couldn't help but chuckle. "Sorry," Scarlet apologized. "I'm just so overjoyed." She turned to Plucky and nuzzled him again. "I thought I'd lost you, but now I've got you back." "As I was going to say, you should both thank your lucky stars. Gah!" Robber cackled, happy that he had reunited the lost couple. He watched warm-heartedly as the two foxes continued their affectionate cuddling. Thunder continued to rumble across the sky, which brought them to their senses again. However, they were then dragged away from reality again, when the two foxes' ears caught the noise of what felt like something magical. "What's that noise? It's enchanting," Plucky pondered. With curiosity, the three of them followed the sound. It wasn't far away. Round the corner of a side street, there was a house with a small open window with some sort of device next to it on the inside. It was a radio, playing a symphony of some calming classical music. Plucky and Scarlet didn't know what it was, having never heard such rhythms before, but Robber knew, having spent more time around humans. "It's music! Something humans listen to for fun," he confirmed. "It's so rhythmic," Plucky said warmly, as he listened to the music intently. "Almost romantic," Scarlet said as she nuzzled him. Plucky and Scarlet leant on each other, listening to the music. They were swaying side to side, as if in some sort of romantic dance. Although Robber was happy he had reunited them, he started to feel a little like a third wing, though that wasn't to last long. Suddenly the music stopped. "Ah, I was enjoying that," Scarlet moaned slightly. The music on the radio was then replaced by a small melody of quick-paced music. Following that, the voice of a human talking. This slightly startled the animals, thinking it was an actual human talking and not the radio until they realized it was just the radio. But they continued to listen with curiosity. "This is a breaking news story," the voice from the radio announced. "The Met Office has increased the amber weather warning to red. The severe storm has multiplied in size and is approaching the region. Power outages are likely, and authorities insist that everyone should stay indoors until the storm has passed." The window was suddenly closed, cutting off the voice. Plucky, Scarlet, and Robber looked between them with looks of concern. It may have been on a human on the sound machine that had said it, but they knew what it meant. "It must be a big storm if even humans are scared of it," Scarlet said worriedly. "Overprotective, I think," Plucky stated naively. "I saw the storm forming from outside the town. I didn't think it was that—" He was cut off by a huge clap of thunder that startled all three of them. "Big."
"I felt the ground shake from that," Robert cawed.
"Thank God it wasn't just me," Scarlet muttered. Suddenly, the heavens opened. The rain from the storm had arrived, but was only light at the moment. Another flash of light, another clap of thunder. It echoed across the sky and the land, momentarily deafening anything that heard it. "We should find the others," Plucky said anxiously, then asked Scarlet, "Did you guys find shelter?" "Yeah, but not enough to last through this storm," she answered worriedly. "Robber, you know this town. Is there anywhere we can go?" Plucky asked the crow, raising his voice to be heard over some more thunder.
"Yes, I know a place. Gather your friends and meet me at the entrance to that churchyard."
Scarlet knew where the others would be foraging themselves, if they hadn't gone back to the makeshift shelter to avoid the rain already. Plucky went with her. Soon, though, they ran into the two hares, two squirrels, and the grounded falcon, as they were on their way back to the shelter. Dash noticed them approaching first, but then realized that there were two foxes. But she recognized that black-eared fox anywhere.
"Plucky!"
Dash ran over to him and hugged him. "Hello, Dashy," Plucky said to her warmly.
"When did you get here?"
Dash exclaimed.
"We've all been so worried."
"It's a long story, but I had some help," Plucky smiled, and the others soon came over to voice their relief in seeing him again. They would all have said more, but another clap of thunder and the rain getting heavier soon reminded them of the great tempest above their heads. "We're heading back to our shelter," Bolt announced. "No, we can't go back there. It'll be waterlogged already," Scarlet declared. "There's some better shelter we can go to escape this storm."
"By all means, lead the way. I'm already drenched,"
Jester shouted irritably. The rain now was coming down in frequent huge droplets of water. The sky flashed with streaks and bolts of lightning, and the air rumbled with roaring and booming thunder. With Plucky and Scarlet leading the way to the churchyard, they were there almost instantly. Robber was waiting for them, perched atop the iron gate. The crow led them into the churchyard. Woody, Jester, Dash, Bolt, and Perry managed to squeeze through the iron bars, but Plucky and Scarlet had to jump the tall stone wall. All safely on the other side, but still in the pouring rain, Robber led them through the massive gravestones until they reached the entrance to an old fox earth, and a mound underneath the roots of an oak tree. One by one, they all went inside, including Robber. Even he wanted to get out of the thundering rain. Once inside, they all shook the worst of the rain from their fur coats or feathers.
Ah, nice and dry, Woody expressed. And warm, Scarlet said quietly, lying on the floor. This place is cozy, Dash announced, looking around the place. Robber, how did you know about this place? Plucky asked him, still standing by the entrance. For some reason he felt uneasy being here. He soon found out why. Well, it's actually your parents' old earth. They lived here before you were born. Ever since they left for White Deer Park, it's been unoccupied, Robert explained almost awkwardly. No wonder Plucky felt uneasy. His parents used to live in this very earth. He sniffed lightly. Apart from the obvious presence of his companions, there were also a couple of lingering scents still in here. One he recognized instantly as his mother's, Whisper. The other, though, he had no idea. No doubtably it must be his father's, Bold. Plucky looked on the ground and lifted his paw, underneath which was a paw print set in the solid earth, one that wasn't his own, but was almost identical. Plucky couldn't take it. He had never felt so close, yet so far away from the father he never knew. He stood looking at the floor of the earth with a pained look on his face. Plucky, are you okay? Scarlet asked him sincerely. Yeah, Plucky stuttered. A tear then fell from his eye. I'm sorry. I gotta get out of here. He turned tail and ran back outside into the storm. Plucky, wait! Dash called out to him. Come back! It's not safe out there! Bolt called out to him. I'll go after him, Scarlet said as she stood up to follow. The full force of the storm was above the town now. The rain was persistent, thick, and heavy. It took barely a few seconds before Plucky's fur was almost completely drenched, and he could barely see through it in the darkness. Like the human on the radio had said, the storm had knocked out all the power. All of the street lamps were out. The only available light came from the abundant flashes of pure white light as more lightning streaked across the sky. Following the flashes was the thunder. It was a symphony of rumbles, booms, and grumbles, the only thing that could be heard, as well as the pitter-patter of the rain splashing on the tarmac roads. There was also a relentless wind which at times blew roof tiles and chimney pots off the buildings. It was so fast, forcing Plucky to squint. It reminded the Fox Will of the blinding blizzard on the mountain almost 3 months ago. Plucky still ran through it, as if he was unaware of the severe weather conditions around him. He may have been crying, but it would be unnoticeable through the rain falling upon him. He just couldn't stay there. He had to think. He had to talk about it. But the one person he wanted to talk to right now had been dead for the last 2 years. He suddenly realized he'd ventured back to the edge of the town. He stopped and thought. Through the darkness he saw a secluded, overgrown stone shed. It had an uneven slate roof, and he decided to climb to the top of it. He sat carefully on the rough slates, and looked to the sky. Even if his father could not hear him, nor communicate back to him, he just had to. Why aren't you there for me? He shouted vainly into the darkened, thundering sky. Plucky was taken aback when the sky replied with a loud clap of thunder. No, that's not what I mean, he carried on. It's just, everyone knows who their father is. Why not me? He looked down with a sigh of despair, trying to stifle tears. I know. You did what you had to. Looking back up to the sky. For Mum's sake. For my sake. But... Plucky then raised his voice. Why did you have to die? Why couldn't you have just held on for me? Tears freely left his eyes and mixed with the rain falling on him. So I could meet you! See you! Even if it was just a one time! Plucky whimpered, and then his voice turned into a sincere tone. Father, all you'll ever be to me is a name. All I ever know of you is from tales and stories." He looked down with his eyes closed, his face scrunched up. He sniffed lightly, trying to suppress losing more tears. He was suddenly alerted by someone calling his name through the storm. He recognized the voice instantly. The calm, tender voice he had fell in love with. "Plucky!" Scarlet called out to him. She then saw him through the darkness atop the shed as another flash of light occurred. She jumped up to the roof of it and looked at Plucky worryingly. "Plucky! Please come back! It's not safe! You'll catch your death out here!" she pleaded. Out of all the ones who could have come after him, he was glad it was her, but he was still upset. "Why can't I let go, Scarlet?" He spoke sharply. "Why can't I let go of someone I never knew? Someone I will never know!" "Is that what you've been troubled about? Your father?" Scarlet asked sincerely. "Yeah, but not just recently. I realize now. I've been troubled by it all my life," Plucky explained forlornly. "No, I just don't know. I don't know anything. All I am, all I ever will be, is a son without a father." He looked away from her and down in sadness. "Plucky, just because you never knew your father, it doesn't make you any lesser a person," Scarlet attempted to comfort him. "As long as you remember him, he'll never truly be gone." "But I don't remember him!" Plucky snapped. "I will never remember him! I have no memories of him! The only impression I have of my brave, heroic father is from his story. That's all it ever will be. Only from stories." I'm really sorry about this, guys. Scarlet was taken aback by Plucky snapping at her. She'd never been on this end of a situation like this. Clearly, Plucky getting over the death of his father, even though it happened before he was born, was something he'd never tackled before. Plucky had told her more about it since the initial discussion of it during their time together. Back on the train! She knew Plucky revered his father as a hero, having given his life for him, but just listening to stories wasn't enough. She attempted again to try and console him. "Plucky, I learned to cope with death at a very young age," Scarlet declared, trying to sympathize with his sadness. "It's probably the reason I can be emotionally distant at times. But even I can't begin to compare to how you must be feeling." Plucky said nothing, nor did he move. He just staring at his paws, but his ears twitched as Scarlet spoke, so she knew he was listening. "Plucky, listen to me," Scarlet said warmly, moving closer to him. She flinched when some thunder rumbled loudly across the sky, causing her to pause. Plucky turned to look at her. "Plucky, even if you don't remember your father, it doesn't mean you don't know who he was. He lives on through the memories of your family and friends, through the stories of him they have told and retold. The same stories you have told me. And most importantly, through you," Scarlet comforted him. She could see Plucky's eyes darting around, but not looking at her. Clearly he was deep in thought. So Scarlet continued. "If you want to know who your father was, all you need to do is look inside yourself, Plucky. You're probably more like him than you ever realized. He lives on through you, and—" Scarlet suddenly stopped when she realized what she was about to say. "And what?" Plucky stuttered in his grief. Scarlet knew she had to tell him now. "Plucky, there's something I have to tell you." She paused as tears started to leave her eyes, while Plucky listened to her intently. "It's probably not the best time for it, really, but you have to know." Plucky was silent, waiting for Scarlet to speak next, wondering, worrying, waiting for what she would say. Then Scarlet said it. "Plucky, I'm carrying your cubs." Plucky's eyes widened.
He was speechless, allowing Scarlet to continue. "And your father will live on through them, too." Scarlet finished with a wide smile. Her eyes went watery, in a mixture of sadness and joy. "Are you sure?" Plucky asked her, this wonderful news almost completely distracting him from why he was upset. "Pretty sure," Scarlet nodded. "Otherwise I'd be a little more worried I've been throwing up the contents of my stomach most of the last week," she said as a half-hearted joke. "How long have you known?" "Over a week now. I tried to tell you before, but—" Scarlet was interrupted when Plucky just suddenly nuzzled and cuddled her. She accepted it lovingly. His eyes too were watering with a mix of joy and sadness. Scarlet was carrying their cubs. He should have expected it, really, but it was still fantastic news. The only thing that could retrieve him from his grief over the father he never knew, finding out he was to be a father himself. He stopped cuddling Scarlet and then turned to face the sky again. "You hear that, father?" Plucky shouted joyfully into the darkened sky. "You're gonna be a granddad!" He finished with a big smile, tears still flowing from his eyes. "Are you okay?" Scarlet asked him warmly. "Yes, I'm okay," Plucky replied. A little half-heartedly, but he was okay. "Will you come back now?" "Yes. A storm like this is no place for a vixen in your condition." "I concur." Both foxes were almost drenched through to the bone by the time they reached the churchyard again. The storm had still not relented from battering the landscape, urban and rural alike. The roads had become rivers, and drain pipes became waterfalls. Truly, it was the most rain they had seen in their lives. At the entrance to his parents' old earth, Plucky paused again. He was still uneasy about going in there, but suddenly Scarlet lightly nuzzled him. It was all the comfort he needed. They both entered the den, and once safely inside, they shook what they could of the water from their pelts. They had been gone a while. All the others were asleep. Quietly, Scarlet lay down on the floor of the earth while Plucky still stood, looking around as if examining the den. This earth may have been a representation of his past, before his past, but that beautiful vixen and the cubs she carried represented his future. And from now on, that's what he would look to. Plucky lay down next to his mate, placed his head lovingly and protectively over hers, and they both fell to sleep. The rumble of thunder and persistent precipitation continued outside, but in here it was nice and warm and comfortable. A loud crash of thunder woke Plucky from his sleep. He looked up to the entrance. It was still dark outside. He can't have been asleep very long. Who could have through the storm? Then again, he had a long nap earlier in the day. He then saw through the darkness of the earth Robber was Robber was standing by the entrance, peering outside. His coal-black feathers were perfect camouflage. Plucky stood up quietly, so as not to wake up Scarlet, and walked over to the crow and sat next to him. They soon began to converse quietly. "Thought you slept through the night," Plucky said jokingly. "No creature can sleep through this, not without being really tired," Robber chuckled in response. "I'll consent to that. That last clap of thunder woke me up." "Are you okay?" Robber asked him wearily. "Yeah, why do you ask?" "I didn't realize until we got in here that I hadn't considered how you felt. This being your parents' old earth." "Well, I couldn't handle it at first, but then Scarlet cheered me up." Plucky gave a reassuring smile. "I'm sorry, Plucky," Robber apologized sincerely. "If you hadn't met me, you wouldn't have had to suffer through this," referring to the obvious emotional turmoil Plucky had just gone through. "It's okay, Robber. I kinda needed it," Plucky reassured the crow. "Plus, you don't need to apologize. If I hadn't met you, I would never have found my friends, and I'd probably still be wandering aimlessly, completely lost." "I guess then you should thank—" Robber began. "My lucky stars." "I know," Plucky said cheerily. "Thank you for your help, Robber." "It was a pleasure. Anything to help old son," Robber affirmed. I'd feel a little guilty if I asked one more favor of you, Plucky inquired.
Not at all. Go ahead.
If it's not too much trouble, because I know it's still far, but since you know my mother, could I kindly ask you to fly to White Deer Park to tell her that I'm safe and I'll be home soon?
You can count on me. I'll leave as soon as the sun's up, assuming the storm has passed.
You sure it's not too much trouble?
Not at all. It's barely a day's fly there for a bird. Robber smirked humorously. Might be another week for you, though. That is if the country isn't flooded.
Thanks again, old friend, Plucky smiled. I'm glad to have met you.
As I am glad to have met you, Robber beamed.
They both continued to chat for a while, but eventually attempted to get some more sleep, despite the storm making it a difficult task. Plucky nestled back next to Scarlet. She stirred slightly in her sleep, but didn't wake, and Plucky just gave her a light nuzzle. He looked out towards the entrance. He thought now. They were closer to home than ever before, but even so, he felt now it would only be more difficult to get there, yet also more imperative than ever now that Scarlet was carrying cubs. Another thought soon crossed his mind. Even when they got there, Scarlet would still be hunted by her former kin until they killed her. Plucky was not going to let that happen, no matter the cost. He muttered to himself quietly, so near, yet so far. I recommend everyone who reads this chapter to play the song He Lives in You from The Lion King 2 for that bit with Plucky and Scarlet where they talk in the rain. And I recommend everyone go back and watch the Animals of Farthing Wood Season 2. I myself have watched most of Bolt's story up until the point where he died. And I know all about it due to doing a PowerPoint on Animals of Farthing Wood at college. I had a lot of fun, and this chapter was emotional. As I said before, I read ahead, and this may be these 4 chapters I've recorded. The chapter 18 and this chapter are my favorites out of the whole story. 14 Sleepyhead09, you are the best writer. I'm glad to share your stories with everyone. Well, my recording space is almost out, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter, where we finally end the journey of a lifetime, and face off in the final battle against Caesar, Tyron, and the Great Foxes. But until then, I'm the Masked Ranger, saying, keep moving forward, remember the oath, and thank your lucky stars. Toodaloo!